Well, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. It's amazing to be back here. We were here 5 years ago, and it was definitely one of the best experiences we had. I just remember the audience as being incredibly warm, and we're actually delighted, Marie-Hélène and I, to have the opportunity to bring Shama here, straight from the streets of Egypt, where Shama and I were actually in Cairo just a few days ago. We got back on Sunday. And we can talk about that. Basically, what we want to do is do something much more intimate. We want to do a sort of actor's studio presentation where we're going to talk to Shama, and we're going to talk through some of the clips of the film that we're working on that, as Andrew said, is in progress. And it gives you sort of an intimate portrait of what's happening, because the revolution, as we all know, isn't over. It's unfolding as we talk, and last night, I think, is an incredible example of that with what happened in Libya. So, we can
just tell you very briefly about our film. We're working on a portrait of the revolution as told through the eyes of people who actually lived it and went out into the streets. And our efforts are to artistically catalyze that and tell the story not only of the 18 days of the revolution in Tahrir Square, but really, the revolution really began on February 11th after Mubarak was toppled from power, and how you go and continue to bring those revolutionary ideals to a new society and those difficulties and frictions that exist. And we can talk to Shama more about that.
And our film is called If, and hopefully it'll be out, sometime early next year, depending on where the revolution goes. One of the things that, as we get into talking about this, that's so important. You try to think about what are the big ideas that are coming out of this and how particularly it relates to what's happening in PopTech. And I think three really important ideas come out of this. It's the power of the individual to change the world, the power of collaboration of individuals in what is now, what we're seeing is a leaderless collaboration, which is extraordinary, and a chain of inspiration from individual to individual. And all three of these things are things that Shama knows about intimately, and I think...
So I think just to prompt the first question in the beginning of the dialogue, Shama, if you could talk about why you went out onto the streets on January 25th and what was going on in your mind.
Okay. Well, first of all, before this whole uprising started in Egypt, I had my heart set on just leaving the country and forgetting about everything I went through in Egypt. I was applying for an internship in some genomics institution somewhere in Cambridge, and I got accepted on December, but the revolution started on January. So I just left everything behind and went to the streets. I was like wandering around trying to talk to journalists and media as much as I can, because I didn't like the way the Western media was covering what was going on in Egypt. And I randomly ran into Micah while he was filming, and I started to talk with him. And then we ended up detained by the Egyptian army for filming. So,
and I think our initial meeting was really interesting, because it was, in essence, this idea about collaboration. I had landed that day in Cairo, right in the middle of the revolution, and gone to Tahrir Square, and Shama was one of the first people I met, and she came up with a sign, and I had a camera, and she said, "Do you want to film my side?" And I said yes, and that was the beginning. And it's this type of interaction between people to people and the openness, which just became this extraordinary outpouring of energy. And we're going to...
And Shama, too, if you can talk just briefly about why you went on the streets. It was a very dangerous and uncertain outcome. What was it that drove you to go out on January 25th?
Actually, when I was looking at what the people of Tunisia were able to do, I felt really inspired. And then I was like, why wouldn't we do this like them? We were going through the same, you could say, the same situation, corruption, and we're not able to participate in politics or maybe socialize or be part of our society, even if we're the ones who are supposed to be, you could say, the core of this society. So I actually helped people in organizing the event online. I had a Facebook page, and I was sharing the event with everyone I know. I was talking to everyone I know about the 25th of January, but I didn't actually expect anything to happen on this day. So yeah, but it just happened.
And we'll show a short clip now that gives a sense of what it felt like at that time.
I have always thought that Egyptians are weak and desperate and cowards, and they will always be so, and that they don't deserve freedom. But when I came out this day and looked at the faces of people and hear the echoes of their shouting all over the place, it changed a lot inside me and about the way I consider everything around me, including me personally. I'm running for pages. I started it after the Tunisian Revolution. I'm calling you to go down to the streets.
Presumably, people in the same country wouldn't do this to each other.
شايل معاك مطوه ليه يا ريس؟ مش مطوه. انا اقول والله الناس فيها بتغلط والله العظيم، انا والله العظيم مع الشعب.
And you don't really understand how to define the parameters of your enemy because it's not manifest in a person or a group of people, but it's actually an entire system.
Apparently they were caught with this.
The outlines of evil are not really clear.
If you can't keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you.
They are shooting. There are people. There are some of the thugs with rifles on the bridge, and they shot at our demonstrators. Every couple of minutes, you find the ambulance coming, carrying wounded, and every now and then you find them carrying someone dead. People were just being overrun, like the latest.
My father is a human rights lawyer, and my mother and father are activists from ages. Yani. I've always been more or less involved. But for some reason, I took Khaled Saeed's case very personally.
If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies.
I felt so miserable because I felt that we personally failed Khaled Saeed. So from the beginning, and I think this is the case with many of the young people who participated and who usually do not participate in protest, they took the case very personally and they felt that each one of them owes it to Khaled Saeed to get his right back.
The first spark for this revolution, or one of the main reasons of this spark,
they started beating him up and they said, we're not going to leave you till we kill you. We came to kill you.
he will be in our hearts forever, because we are all Khaled. We are all Khaled Saeed.
Yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
And Khaled Saeed was a young man in Egypt about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, who was killed. And his death was one of the major catalysts for this revolution because people were so outraged by it. And I think it goes to the fact of what's so important about the individual. You know, the individual matters. One death does matter, and it can, in essence, change the world. And that's why we focused our film around a few people whose actions aren't necessarily heroic in a way, but they're heroic in the sense that they're understated, and their courage of going out into the streets day after day can make an enormous change in the world. And that's one of the things that Shama does all the time, which is in the midst of these very difficult and turbulent times, she's still out on the streets, and sometimes there's only 20 or 30 protesters out there, and she will march with them just to make it 21 or 31. And so, Shama, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening now in Egypt?
Well, after Mubarak resigned on the 11th of February, he appointed a Supreme Council of Armed Forces, which is basically 19 army generals who are Mubarak's men, and they took over the country. Since they took over the country, around 12,000 Egyptian citizens were faced military trials, and 9,000 of them are convicted and are in military jail, being tortured, and for maybe like writing a blog post, for example, walking after the curfew, having a knife. They could charge you like 10 years for walking around with a knife. So, what else? Yeah, thing is, Mubarak was actually, if the corrupted regime in Egypt was, you could say, a body, Mubarak was only the head, and you still have all the components of the old regime taking over everything. Supreme Council of Armed Forces is actually using this divide and conquer attitude, and they're kind of like trying to bring sectarianism issues, and they are chasing activists, human rights activists, journalists, filmmakers, protesters. So these are like the only reason you might be detained and kept in a military prison.
And we'll show you another quick clip which shows you what it feels like to be on the streets now in Egypt. You don't see anyone?
What kind of protest are they talking about? I mean, come on, we've been protesting for 7 months. So maybe people lost momentum. I feel responsible for what happened. When I see that I was one of those few thousands who came to the streets on the 25th of January, and we were the reason why everything around us is happening. And I look at the faces of the families of the detainees and the families of the martyrs, I feel like I'm somehow responsible for them.
Yeah, this is the protest. Yeah, they came all the way around. I thought they were going to start from here. I should like distribute the sign. To recognize anyone. I wrote this. My flyers. These are my flyers. I mean, they are anonymous, you know, because I could be arrested for this. They are all about questions. I'm trying to like raise questions, and I want people to answer themselves. I'm not telling them facts, not at all.
If we have had a revolution here, why are they arresting and kidnapping all the revolutionaries? Like the majority of people are politically unaware even before the revolution. And after the revolution, it got even worse due to the brainwash on TV.
I'm trying to convince them that everything goes back to the Ministry of Defense.
ضد حكومة بتتحدانا معتصمين والحق معانا.
In the last couple of months, they were trying to imprison us inside Tahrir Square. And Tahrir Square developed such a bad reputation. They kept saying that, okay, these are just unemployed, useless kids who have nothing better to do but going to Tahrir. People were kind of separated from us. So the fact that we are coming out of Tahrir to people and talking to them is really like a good achievement in keeping the passion of the revolution, also raising awareness between the people who have no idea what is going on. They think that these protests are stopping the cycle of production. This protest was supposed to be about military tribunals for civilians. And also the army officers who joined us. But turned out that the guys who are chanting in front of the protests are chanting for like general stuff. They didn't mention something specific about the military tribunals, for example. But all the signs are actually about that. And the families of the detainees, like I told you, are in the front. But thing is, like from time to time, it's spontaneous. That's why it's not organized. No one is leading. So whenever someone feels like saying something, he says it.
البلد عملت وزارة جديدة. البلد عملت.
Oh, this is the most important.
Okay, well,
We were hitting the most dynamic section of the footage, which basically shows the interaction between people on the street and Shama, where they come up and start ripping her flyers and yelling at her and asking her why she's, continuing to wreak havoc in Egypt. Why can't you just accept the military?
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges now in Egypt is that people, the population, the majority of the population, want stability, and the fight is now with the military that's controlling the country. And as Shama mentioned earlier, the 12,000 civilians have been brought to military trials, one of whom is on hunger strike, a young man named Micah Nabil Sanad, and he's on his 60th day by now, I think, of a hunger strike, because he was thrown in jail for writing a blog post. He wrote a blog post six months ago in which he said simply the military and the people were never one hand, because the chant on the street was after the revolution that the military and the people are one hand. People wanted to feel that the military was behind them and supporting them, and that turned out not necessarily to be the case. And Shama, so what do you think now about the situation and what can be done going forward?
Well, I think the only thing that we should be doing is just keep going, because either way, all of us will end up in a military jail. But thing is, when I see how like everything all over the world everyone all over the world is kind of like trying to connect. And when I look at people on Occupy Wall Street, for example, and people in Europe protesting for basically the same set of rights that we're asking for, freedom of speech, to stop like the corruption in corporations and politicians. So this pretty much gives me hope that something might be done if all of us got to know more about the fact that we're all suffering from the same thing. So my idea from the beginning was I wanted people out there, maybe in Europe and the US, to know that we are all connected. We are all should be, if you're fighting over there and we're fighting over here, we should be connected. And I'm actually part of, you could say, a movement on Facebook. It's called Global Liberation Network. And basically, we're like 6 members from different countries, from Egypt, Iran, the US, Greece, Syria, and South Africa. And we're kind of like working on doing the same thing, helping each other and spreading information and sending our, you could say, if I want to send a message from Egypt to the whole world, they help me out in sending it. So this is basically, I guess this is the solution for what is going on in Egypt, just to get the message out.
And I think the most important message to know is that the Egyptian revolution only started on January 25th, and it's got a long way to go. And each revolution in the Arab world in different countries is very different, and each has its own trajectory. And I think we can all be part of what's happening in Egypt by lending our support and being aware of what's going on.